Okay, so what happened to us so we develop um, the binge eating cycle in our life? When we were born as perfect babies. Um, and when we understand a little bit the teaching of God, we know that God created us as his equal. So by nature, we're we're perfect. We've been created um, as the image of God. So we are perfect in our imperfection. Um, After that, we realize we grew up. We're starting to live in this world, in that really physical world. And when I was young, and it started as young as I was 11 years old, 12, that binge eating. And I remember thinking, like, why I can't stop eating? Why I'm not, I just need more and more and more. Why I cannot stop eating? And it's especially, it caused some question, like, if God is perfect, if this life, if we're protected by him, you don't understand. You start feeling like maybe there's something wrong with me, like what happened to me. And if we look at binge eating on as it's a form of addiction to food, but I would say that binge eating is more the actual addiction to being on a diet. um, but any addiction is a way of dealing with a pain. It's because there's um, an uncomfortable feeling that we need to reach for something that makes us feel good. And whatever it is, um, I think that the more heavy is the pain, the more the addiction can be intense. So we have all kind of drugs, but we also have sexual addiction. And then we have the binge eating, and we have the food. And usually, the woman will most likely go towards the food in the binge cycle addiction, because it's like we have a really big sensitivity, and when you put it in that world with that pressure on the young girls, the way to look and stuff like that, so it's really easy to go find a comfort for your pain in food. And especially as a kid, when you're young, you don't have access to drugs, especially except if you grew up in a more um, in another kind of area. But usually young people, we just grew up as in a normal environment, but we have that pain, we don't know how to deal with it, so we turn around food because we start realizing how food can makes us better. um, so the concept as well, to understand that, okay, so why is the reason I cannot stop eating, the binge eating? When it started, it was because there was a pain that needed to be dealt with, and that pain is caused by a trauma. That trauma can be either a series of little events or a long time of negative feelings, so depression and these kind of feeling, or it can be for one traumatic big event, like being raped or losing a parent, like in one moment. What the connection with God is so the trauma is not the actual event or what happened to you to have that trauma is not because of what happened. It's because at the moment that trauma, there was a disconnection from God. And by that disconnection, I mean it's kind of it's losing faith in God. So something happened that made you disconnect. It can be just thinking that you're not enough. If you think that you're not enough, you're not connected to God anymore. Because if you were truly connected to God, you would see that you're perfect the way that you are. But that's just normal in a society these days, that we have those kind of event and thoughts. We get lost on disconnected from our godliness as a person, like our holiness. So the actual pain that we live is caused by the trauma, but the trauma is the disconnection from God. And I need to really mention that disconnection from God is not that God from that religion. It's from that unconditional love, that faith, that being positive, that life is on your side, that you're safe. It's all these things. It's like that big image of what God represents. So that's how binge eating is more than we think connected to God and our spiritual life. So usually what happens, it's like you have that pain, and I just want to repeat it again, but that pain is not directly connected to the event that happened, but more from the disconnection. Because a lot of people that are followers of God, when you attain like that God consciousness, you realize that things don't happen to you. They happen, but don't happen to you. And often, if you're in that state of mind when something more negative happened to you, and now I'm not talking about really hard thing, but smaller thing, you realize that it's not about you, it's about the other person. It's not against you. So you might be hurt by the event, but there's not as much trauma out of it. You're not as, so when we're a kid, we enter this world, we're perfect babies, and our mother, she birthed us, and she's directly connected to God, but it all depends on her life too. But she's supposed to be that by giving us the safety that this physical world is safe, because we used to be in that spiritual world where everything we knew, we felt the love, so we knew, we had that certainty. But in the physical world, it's different. So your mother, by breastfeeding you, being safe, having you always with you, she's supposed to give you that trust, that faith about life, that natural thing. And it's often the traumatic event that arrive as we grow older, because we're more by ourselves, and we never know. Like our mothers are kind of, they're having their own pain to their own trauma from the generation and generation. So they want to love us, they think they love us, but they're not necessarily giving us that unconditional love that we need to keep that faith in this life. So that might create a disconnection. I'm not saying it's necessarily coming from your mother. Let's remember, it comes from many events or society. It's some people, it's one traumatic, but usually it's from many events, and usually people that has binge eating and stuff like that are really, really sensitive person, and that's why we got more affected by little things. But we'll talk about this later. But it's a gift in your life to be a sensitive person. It's just that our society don't recognize it as a gift. It tells you that you're weak, but it's not. All that pain that you're having right now was just because you were more sensitive to your environment than many other people. That's why you have that mechanism, the defense mechanism, binge eating, to help you with that pain. So when we have that pain, and us as binge eaters, we start looking for relief in food, and that's how, like, we're gonna create a habit out of it. But we're gonna explain that later. But what I want you to remember from that first video and introduction, we're all gonna go see all the pain, the trauma in details, but I want you to start thinking as your binge eating is not the problem, but is the symptoms of that disconnection from God. When we see it like that, we realize that we need to go back to God, to ourselves. God is us, God is our unconditional love, to be able to heal. So again, the binge eating is the symptoms of, is a symptom of something else. And that's pretty much the case in any other addiction with people. The addiction is not the problem. The addiction is the way we deal with the pain, and what created the pain is the trauma, and the trauma is that disconnection. Because if we get stuck into the trauma, it's a physical thing. It's an event. We'll never find a way to get rid of it. It's gonna be always part of our history. And then if you get stuck in it, well, you're gonna stuck with the pain. So the way to heal, it's seeing that trauma as a disconnection from God, and how you can heal, it's that by reconnecting to God. Okay, I think that's enough for the first video. That's just an introduction. I know it may sound big, really big, like where to start, and it's maybe even more like not really like specific, but you'll see how it gets specific with all the videos. Okay, see you in the next one.